In this video, we explore the top 10 countries where Americans are not welcome. From travel restrictions to outright bans, find out which destinations you may want to think twice about visiting as an American. Stay informed and plan your international travels accordingly. Don't forget to subscribe for more travel updates and information. 10th, Russia. Due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, traveling to Russia is currently not an option for Americans. Even before this conflict, Americans faced numerous challenges when attempting to enter the country. Visas must be obtained in advance, and applicants are required to have an invitation letter from a resident in the country to begin the visa application process. The application itself is extensive, asking for details such as travel history over the past decade, educational background, parents' names, employment history, and affiliations with professional organizations. Following these steps, applicants can only hope for a successful visa approval upon the return of their passport. 9th, Bhutan. Landlocked between India and China, the country of Bhutan is a place some tourists may want to visit, but get stuck in the details of how to get in. The country has no embassy of any kind with the United States. As a result, the only way to obtain a proper visa to enter the country is through a tour agency. The visa application itself is not all that complicated, but having to go through a tour operator severely limits the amount of visas issued to anyone wishing to come in. This unusual policy does, however, keep the sheer number of visitors down, allowing your experience to be that much more special. 8th, Iran. Relations between the United States and Iran have been tense for many years, escalating during the Trump administration. As a consequence, Iran initially prohibited all U.S. citizens from entering the country. Although the ban has been lifted, travelers must follow specific procedures to gain entry. Firstly, they must obtain a travel authorization number. Subsequently, they can apply for a visitor visa. However, visitors are required to be accompanied by a guide while traveling within Iran, necessitating their assistance in obtaining the authorization number and visa to explore the country. 7th, India. India, a subcontinent, frequently appears on lists of top cultural destinations. For Americans planning to visit, the process is more complex than just arriving and clearing customs. Obtaining visas well in advance is essential, and this can sometimes be challenging. Those traveling for work must gather documents such as an employer letter, employment contract, and other paperwork. While tourists have a smoother process, they still need to furnish detailed information about their trip. 6th, Cuba. The restriction on Americans traveling to Cuba for business originates from the trade embargo put in place in 1958. This embargo also affected Americans who wish to visit Cuba for leisure purposes. Official tourism to Cuba remains prohibited and illegal today. Nevertheless, Americans can visit Cuba under 12 specific categories of travel, excluding tourism, by obtaining a travel license under one of these categories. A Cuba tourist card, also known as a visa, is always required for entry into the country. Additionally, ensure you have cash, as US currency cannot be exchanged in Cuba, and be cautious about your purchases as some businesses are restricted to American visitors. 5th, Saudi Arabia. Despite the fact that Saudi Arabia is a major supplier of oil to the United States, it has historically been difficult to get a visa to enter the country. Prior to 2019, they were only issued to individuals who were there on a religious visit to Mecca. Beyond that, no tourist visa was available, and those from the US had little ability to visit. However, major changes have been pushing through Saudi Arabia since the election of Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. For the first time, the country began offering visitation rights to many countries, including the USA. Only time will tell if this remains. 4th, North Korea. Currently, North Korea is among the limited number of countries globally where US citizens are prohibited from visiting. Under the Trump administration, a travel ban to the country was enforced for individuals holding American passports. Exceptions are rarely granted by the State Department, as stated on the U.S. Bureau of Consular Affairs website. Before the ban, personal travel was allowed, but tourists had to be accompanied by a North Korean guide, restricting independent exploration. The future will reveal whether the travel restriction will be removed. 3rd, Somalia. Risk of crime, terrorism, kidnapping, and more. Somalia has been the site of a long-hidden conflict, where the Al-Shabaab and the Danab have been engaged in warfare for years. The U.S. has supported the Danab by conducting airstrikes on their behalf. As a result, tensions not only persist between these factions but also involve those who support Al-Shabaab against the U.S. It goes without saying that Somalia is considered one of the less secure countries in Africa. These wars, along with kidnapping for profit and piracy, have led the U.S. government to give the region a travel advisory level 4. As such, Americans are not supposed to travel to the region, and if they are there, they should leave immediately. 2nd, Syria. Syria has been involved in war since 2011. Since that time, over 500,000 people have died, with over 162,000 being civilians alone. As such, it is not surprising that a major portion of the population has been displaced or is seeking asylum from other countries. Americans are not a welcome entity in Syria, Given that the US, along with the UK, France, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey are supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, these forces are against the Syrian army, which is backed by Russia, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Yemen. While there are plans in the future for the US military to leave the country, there has not been a date projected yet as to when this can and will happen. As such, to the Syrian government, Americans are persona non grata. First, Venezuela. Venezuela is a beautiful country. It is also one of the unfriendliest countries in the world. Americans are not traveling there, given the travel advisory level 4 that the government has given Venezuela. Those Americans who choose to travel to the country, despite there being a US embassy, do so at their own risk. The levels of corruption and lack of infrastructure in the Venezuelan government have led to an uptick in criminal activity in the country. This, in addition to the economy collapsing when oil prices drastically fell, threw the country's economy into a tailspin. The tailspin resulted in hyperinflation that left citizens' money being worthless, food shortages in medical care. As such, millions have left the country, trying to find a future in countries that neighbor Venezuela. With the various crises that Venezuela is facing, cartels have had an easy time running drugs and weapons through Venezuela. They have even been successful with their human trafficking rings. All things have led to Venezuela receiving the highest travel advisory possible from the US government. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe this channel and press the bell notification so you never miss any video. Thanks for watching.